So thank you to everyone for joining us today at our second installation of the DOBA webinar series covering a specific topic related to coronavirus. So the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting public health orders have obviously created some pretty far-reaching impacts in our daily lives. And retail sector, I think, at least visibly, along with restaurants, is one of the most immediately affected areas as a result of these mandates and these closures. And so people and retail storefronts are really physically limited in terms of what they can do. And you know, as the United States and Long Beach and LA in particular this week, as they are gradually opening up retail, we're starting to see a conceptually very different retail sector in terms of all aspects of the word, how people do business, how people look for spaces, what shoppers are looking for. And so really the intent of this webinar is to provide a space for open discussion between professionals in the retail sector. And each of our speakers really bring a different background and a different area of expertise related to the retail space. But hopefully I want this webinar to kind of serve as an intersection between all of these ideas and kind of get them in conversation with one another. So I'll start with speaker introductions. And from there, I'll go into the moderated discussion itself. And then
and the reason why 307 is more expensive is
we'll have audience question and answer. So again, I'd ask everyone joining, please mute your phones and your computers to reduce any feedback. And if you have questions throughout the webinar as they come up, please put them in the chat function of this meeting, and we'll get to them at the end. I'll look through those and read them off to our speakers. So without further ado, let's get into introductions here. Michael Berne is our first speaker, and he works as a retail planner and runs a retail planning and consultancy firm in New York, MJB Consulting, as well as being based in the Bay Area. So his firm really provides market analysis and planning to both public and private organizations across the country. In addition to this consultancy, Michael is a pretty prolific writer and lecturer. He's published a number of articles and spoken at both universities and at conferences on the topic of urbanism, urban development in general, and specifically the retail space and how that's changed throughout history and how it's going forward. So Michael, thank you for joining us today. If you want to briefly elaborate on my introduction and give us a little better idea of what it is you do. I think you're on mute.
Thanks, Morris. So yeah, as Morris said, I jump back and forth between New York City and the Bay Area. Fortunately, I hightailed it to the Bay Area in February and was able to avoid the worst of what's been happening in New York. And from the Bay Area, my consulting firm works up and down California, including Southern California. Actually did work in downtown Long Beach for Craig a number of years ago, a retail visioning process. When Chris Larson was working there, he was the project manager, and also right now working in Southern California in Carlsbad Village and in Beverly Hills, and a few other places. And hopefully I'll be getting back down there soon enough. Kind of missing it. It's a little chilly up here. So glad to be.
Thank you. Yeah, I saw Michael speak, I believe, the first time last year at one of our downtown association conferences, and he did a really good job of kind of painting the picture and telling the story of retail, which you wouldn't think, you know, is something that would be so exciting, but he really makes it come to life. So thank you for joining us. Next up, we have Noel Aguirre. And Noel is based in Long Beach here as a principal at Lee & Associates, which is a commercial real estate firm based across the United States. So Noel has specialized in leasing and sales of commercial retail space, as well as office space throughout the Los Angeles area. And he has over a decade of experience in the retail property industry, and he's worked with property owners as well as with tenants, so retailers that are looking for spaces to have a brick and mortar shop. And he actually, and him and Lee and Associates have made a pretty big impact in downtown Long Beach, in addition to the greater Long Beach area, in terms of establishing a lot of these vibrant retail corridors and finding tenants that are a good fit for what consumers are looking for and what the area is looking for. So Noel, thank you for joining us. If you want to briefly elaborate on what I just said and provide some context as to your role.
Yeah, thanks, Mo. Yeah, just to elaborate on Mo's introduction, thank you for everyone being here, and essentially trying to get information on the trajectory of things during this COVID and post-COVID situation. As far as my duties, essentially it's my passion to essentially be the conduit to help operators and tenants fulfill their sort of vision of what they want to provide to the community, and essentially have that language with ownerships to make sure that everybody has the same vision for that particular space and for that particular community, that neighborhood, as it's sort of, you have a halo effect as far as your business and, providing services, memories, all those experiences that we cherish as we live through this world. So I just try to use my experience and my knowledge and my passions for that. So
great, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Mm-hmm.
And last but not least, we have Andrea Guevara. And Andrea is also based in the Long Beach area as a branding and marketing strategist that specializes specifically in small to medium-sized businesses. So she wears a lot of hats in terms of what she's able to do, but really she's here representing brand strength as well as her own personal brand that provides strategy, brand identity consulting, as well as marketing consulting to businesses to kind of help them establish their own values, what products they're trying to represent and what they're trying to push. And she's, before working for Brand Strength, her own company, she's been a creative director at multiple other agencies and has really worked with, pretty much any company under the sun. You said aerospace engineering, I believe, was one of the companies, in addition to record labels. So she's kind of been all over the place, and I think she has a really good idea of the pulse of the consumer and what marketing needs to be done to kind of reflect the values that people are looking for. So thanks for joining us, Andrea. And if you have anything to add, yeah, please let us know.
Well, thank you for the awesome introduction. I really appreciate that. That was highly accurate and and complimentary, so I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm excited to be here today. I really appreciate the opportunity to help more people en masse. We're definitely going through a crazy time in terms of marketing and branding. I know even myself, even though I've been doing this for almost 20 years, when this started happening, it was like, does marketing even matter anymore? Like, is the world ending? And so hopefully we'll be able to really give you some hope and some strategies and things to make it a little easier as we move forward. So thanks for having me here. Oh, and I did notice that's my email address, which you guys are welcome to have on my slide, but my website is brandstrengthmethod.com.
Great, and I'll link those as well in a follow-up after the end of this webinar to the websites as well as appropriate contact information. So yeah, really, getting all three of these people together and trying to have a discussion and kind of unfold what's happening, because it's all happening in real time. So there's a lot of questions at this point, maybe more than answers, but really I think having everyone here will try to trying to get a better idea of what's really going on and what's been changing as it relates to retail. So let's start with the discussion. As I said before, if you have any questions for our speakers, please post them in the chat function of the meeting, and we'll get to those at the very end. So if they come up though, during the webinar, please post them in there. And let's start with the discussion. So Michael, I'll start with you on this one. What were really the guiding concepts and the values that shaped the retail market landscape pre-pandemic? So, what were retailers going for in terms of the shopping experience and in terms of what the consumer was looking for? And I'll just have this as a visual aid here. This is one of our local retail shops in downtown Long Beach. And this was all the layout before everything changed in early 2020. So Michael, take it away, please.
Yeah, thanks, Morris. Well, I guess there's really two ways to answer the question. The first way is really looking at it industry-wide. And actually, the industry retail apocalypse narrative notwithstanding was in not a bad place in March. Consumer sales actually were well higher than projections in January and February. And again, this is industry-wide. And, this narrative of retail apocalypse, I always have felt was largely overstated. I think certainly e-commerce has been a disruptive force, but a lot of the bankruptcies and liquidations we had seen over the years were not just or even primarily about e-commerce. There was also another plot line involving private equity's takeover of retail. And their business model is debt-driven, which left these retailers quite vulnerable to a downtown like the one we're going through, and really unable in any event to make necessary investments in digital and omni-channel. So, and I think that really gets to the heart of why there was so much bad news on the front pages for so many years. But consumer sales actually were quite strong in the first couple months of the year as well. Now, specifically, the other way of looking at this is specifically with regard to downtowns and Main Street business districts, right? And those are the ones that we're primarily talking about today. And there, it's always been a somewhat different story. We had happened upon a formula which seemed to work for downtowns and main streets, after, after 30, 40 years of trying this formula that was so driven by experiential retail, whether that was restaurants, bars, cafes, whether that was health clubs and fitness studios, whether that was hair and nail salons. This was really driving tenanting in downtowns and main streets. And it was something we could do that was very well differentiated versus suburban shopping centers, very well differentiated from the internet. And last 20 years or so, we've been seeing the upside of that. But we were already starting to teeter even before March. It might not have been immediately obvious, but this experiential economy was showing some signs of stress. Food and beverage, it was interesting. Last year, San Francisco actually closed more restaurants than it opened. There's been a lot of cost pressures on restaurants and just merely also a fact of market saturation. And even boutique fitness was starting to show some signs of weakness. And what we were also seeing in a lot of downtowns and main streets were relatively high vacancy rates in some high profile districts where you wouldn't necessarily have expected it. And we were starting to look at some, in my mind, ill-conceived public sector interventions to address those conditions. In fact, you can believe it, on March 3rd of this year, the voters of San Francisco passed by citywide referendum a storefront vacancy tax. Seems like a long time ago right now, but at that moment, it seemed that this was something that would sweep larger cities nationwide. It was being discussed in a lot of places, New York City, Boston, Seattle, Chicago, maybe even parts of LA, not sure. I hadn't heard as much about it there, but the talk of that has obviously dissipated. in the months since. But, there was that. Now we're going to be dealing with a whole other set of problems, which we'll be going into. But yeah, that was a snapshot of where we were 2 months ago.
So really focused on kind of, I guess, the waning days of experience-based retail is what you're describing. And that vacant property tax, that came up as well in Long Beach briefly.
Okay.
But yeah, it was interesting. A lot of those areas, they're pretty high profile corridors that were being affected versus traditionally, blighted storefronts. So yeah, Noel or Andrea, if you guys have anything else you'd like to piggyback on.
Yeah, I'd just like to piggyback on Michael's information. Essentially, it was retail was strong. Unemployment was low. I think it was hovering around 4 or 5%. As far as demand, demand was high for experiential, especially in Long Beach. I think just Long Beach is a unique situation where it's a big city, but we definitely champion the small business and medium business owners, and it seems like being a Long Beach resident for over 20 years, it's like we have intimate, sort of close relationships with those operators. So knowing, first name basis, their families, that type of relationship. Long Beach seems to have a unique relationship with that. And it was essentially late February, March, early March, when things were information as far as cases coming to the U.S. And the trajectory of the cases were, just day over day, it seemed like there were more cases popping up. So it just, I think the information that was given, live was just so fast, and everybody was just sort of in a shock and wanting. So deals that were in the queue were just sort of either being, halted until, business owners wanted to see what was going to happen. So.
I don't have a whole lot to add to that, but I would say from my experience with my clients, there was definitely, obviously, a lot more hope for expansion and entrepreneurial ventures before this happened, especially in the restaurant industry, which is sad because, now we're looking at a completely different restaurant industry landscape. But it'll be interesting to discuss the rest of this. But that's the only thing I wanted to add, is just the growth of restaurants was really good there for a bit, and not so much now.
All right, I think you cut off a little there. But yeah, I think in terms of what you were saying, restaurants and retail do have a lot in common as being storefront, and restaurants, the whole concept is experiential, being there, and is something that you get out of enjoying your meal versus just, eating it. And that's true. There's a lot of anticipation and hope, and especially in Long Beach, in terms of filling these spaces. And I think that this photo here kind of illustrates a lot of what you guys were talking about. This is a small boutique retail shop in downtown Long Beach, and it kind of looks like a home. I think, the intent here is for people to linger. It's for people to enjoy being in the space, not just shopping and trying to get in and out. And so they're trying to make it inviting, trying to ensure that people are spending as much time there as possible. So really there was, especially in our area in Southern California, a lot of anticipated expansion. And I think a lot of retailers and restaurants as well, you kind of want to get ahead of the curve. So if there's a development, or if there's something new that's coming in, you want to have your space there and established and kind of ready to go in anticipation of more people, more offices, things like that. You know, there's a lot of changes that have occurred. You guys started to touch upon those, but in thinking about the whole ecosystem of retail, so you know, that's from the retail planning and consultancy side with Michael, that's from the tenant, retail tenant, the property owner, the whole showing of spaces with Noel, and then Andrea on your side in terms of how a shop actually markets and brands itself. How has this pandemic changed the ecosystem? And so if you guys could just speak to your own expertise, you know, how has this pandemic really changed?
Yeah, I mean, I can start. You know, I think from the point of view of what I do, you know, you know, probably a majority of my clients, not all of them, but a majority of my clients are municipalities and business improvement districts and other sorts of downtown or Main Street organizations who are looking for help understanding the answers to two questions. One is what kind of retail is realistic to hope for? And two, what, if anything, can they do about it, given that these sorts of clients typically themselves do not own and lease retail space? What can they do to support the efforts of people like Noel and property owners as they try to tenant their storefronts? And, you know, I would say that this is my 2008, in fact, during the Great Recession. In times like this, there's even more of an interest in that sort of guidance. I've been really pushing clients to try to get as aggressive and proactive as they can, given their financial constraints. Because, you know, and I say this in two ways. One is that, you know, yes, we are probably going to lose some small businesses. And it's going to be very painful, not only for the merchants themselves, but also for their loyal fans, right? What I think we at some point need to turn our attention to is not just trying to keep existing ones afloat, but also trying to nurture an infrastructure so that new ones can emerge. You know, entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs. They might lose their business and then they'll dust themselves off and want to get back going. And, you know, will there be the tools, the support, if not even the incentives in place to enable them to do that in the fall? I think that's a key question. And also to remember that, you know, what Warren Buffett said, it's been you know, it's been probably repeated too many times in recent months, but it's true. Be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful. And there will be retailers, particularly ones with stronger balance sheets, who see this as a golden opportunity to secure real estate in desirable corridors at relatively inexpensive prices. And so, you know, I think that we have to try to set the stage for those sorts of retailers to come to our districts. And so I think that's what I've been trying to impress upon my clients, is that's really how we need to think of this, is we got to walk and chew gum at the same time. You know, try to make more merchants keep them going and get them to the other side, while at the same time trying to create the platforms for new ones.
Yeah, Michael, to expand on your you know, your thoughts, I think you know, this pandemic is just essentially it's accelerating the trajectory of retail and just certain business models that have been, you know, slowly sort of being you know, pushed out. So to essentially for a company to for a business to, you know, realize those trends and to sort of essentially hopefully set up you know, their business model to you know, to essentially get over this challenge. And I think, you know, Michael initially mentioned omni-channel retail. You know, omni-channel retail is essentially the forefront of what retail is. So it's a 24-hour, you know, there's no business hours. I mean, it's just always open. The consumer from Long Beach to the other side of the world has access to your business, and they could, you know, essentially, you know what you know what your business is about, and what you know, products or vision that you have that you want to you know, provide to the consumer. And you know, you curate that you know, digitally, and then also have some brick and mortar locations, and then you're integrated also as far as logistics, and so that, you know, everything's seamless, and there's no you know, if there is issues, you know, a lot of those issues are accounted for. So.
So omni-channel retail obviously seems like something that is based in e-commerce, just in terms of access. So really being able to kind of make, you know, brick and mortar spaces relevant seems like a challenge, especially if something is just being used as, you know, say a showroom or somewhere to see products, rather than actually that being the center for, you know, the commerce itself. Going forward, I think it is definitely interesting. Andrea, from your perspective, you know, how does, you know, a business, how are they going to have to change the way that they function in terms of branding, in terms of marketing? It's a huge pivot, especially because everything is turning so quickly in terms of what people are looking for, what values that they hold to be important. So really, from your perspective, that branding, marketing perspective, how has this pandemic changed the way that a shop will present itself?
Yeah, so I think that, and can you hear me okay now?
Yep.
I'm not cutting out? Okay, cool. There's a few things to keep in mind. I think that one of the most essential things to ground yourself with as a business owner right now is in your brand strategy. When you're thinking about marketing, those are your kind of, I like to say, like, marketing is kind of like a one-night stand, and branding is more like a long-term relationship. And branding is more important right now. Marketing is still important, but if you ground yourself in the original reasons why you started this business in the first place and the original value that you provide, that gives you kind of a jumping off point to find ways to pivot in ways that are going to resonate with your customers, because you know your customers. But the other side of that is, with that deep, you know, kind of self-knowledge, there's also the aspect of really putting yourself in your customer's shoes, even more than you normally would, because that, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but, you know, everyone is in a very different psychological place, and this is an ongoing thing too. I think in the beginning of this, a lot of us thought, oh, this is going to be a couple months, maybe 3 months max. And now we're looking at, this is probably in some form or another going to be at least a couple of years of a changed new normal type of retail situation. So the other side of that is, you know, it's like balancing, how do I adapt my space and to my customers and what I'm offering, but stay grounded in what makes them attracted to me in the first place, because you don't want to lose that. And then I think the other thing is leverage, you know, paying attention to, when you pay attention to where people are coming from mentally, you're going to have an easier time paying attention to what is going to trend. So for instance, there's a large trend already starting to support local businesses, right? And the more you can leverage the local aspect, the more you can leverage the human aspect. There was a recent study done by a communications firm that it was like 77% of respondents said that if brands weren't acknowledging that things are different and being acting with integrity, they would lose trust with that brand. They said forever. So I think, that's the biggest thing, is giving yourself time to think this through and then look at what's going on honestly to adapt.
I think in that presentation they had a good tagline. It was crisis reveals character. And so,
yes, yeah, that was my title.
But I think that's true in terms of just from the marketing, but then also, going back to the perspective of, commercial leasing or doing any kind of retail consultancy. In a time like this where there's a lot of pressure, people do kind of peel back the layers and go towards working off of, more internal motivations. And something similar, Michael touched on this, is happening with us at the Downtown Long Beach Alliance, because we are one of those, public-private organizations that is trying to create that ecosystem, that support system that's there to encourage businesses, working with people like Noel, or if someone needs, referring to people to someone like Andrea. So we're also, in that pivoting moment where we're trying to figure out how we change our resources and our operations to facilitate, keeping smaller shops and working to have some more business continuity. So I think, especially now, after about 2 or 3 months, people are starting to see some of the measurable effects, and they're really starting to reevaluate how they interact with retailers, with their clients. And so, there's a lot of moving parts, and everything's kind of causing something else. There's a lot of intersectionality with all of that. And so you guys kind of touched on this, but in terms of the consumer psyche changing as a result of coronavirus, when I say consumer, I mean shopper going to a shop. I mean, from a real estate perspective, if I'm a tenant, if I'm looking for a space and I'm reaching out to a real estate broker, what am I looking for? And then as a marketing perspective, obviously people have become a little more cautious, but is there anything more definable in each of your respective expertise that has changed? And then going off of that, are they here to stay? Is it just going to be 6 months, people are going to think like this, year, or is this going to be a generational change that really affects the way that people interact? So, yeah.
I'll start. Oh, sorry.
Either or.
Why don't you go ahead.
Okay. I'll start off. This is something that I'm discussing with my clients, and I'm also teaching widely right now, is we need to understand from that psychological perspective that there is a massive change in consumer minds. And we are seeing, obviously, we're already seeing the beginnings of consumer behavior change, but I think that that's going to be an evolution. I think one thing we need to be really clear on is that everything that we're putting out there is competing with daily news cycle of tragedy upon tragedy. So we cannot treat anything like it's just business as normal. We're going to have kind of two big consumers. We're going to have the consumers that don't believe it's as big of a deal as maybe others do. And then and they want to return to normal, and there's that real pull for normalcy as a way to cope. And then we have the other side who's really going to be looking for leadership because they're stressed. Most people right now to one degree or another are in that reptilian fight or flight brain pattern right now. Some are worse than others. It just depends, and it depends on the day. I'm sure we all feel that. So we have to look at that as, yes, that's what's happening now. I also think that that's going to be a long-term thing. With what everyone's going through right now is a form of trauma in one way or another to different severity levels. And there's going to be a lot of people developing different types of PTSD, so SPTSD, sustained, when you have a long trauma period. So we have to understand that when that happens, people are more emotional, which can be used for good or bad. So when your prefrontal cortex that's managing all that executive function normally is compromised in that fight or flight mode, it lowers your resilience to stimulus, and it also lowers your ability to regulate that emotion. So as retailers, the more that you can position yourself as a helper, and as like Michael was saying before, being proactive rather than just reactive, you're going to have an opportunity to create brand loyalty with those consumers on a much higher level than actually normal, because they are more emotional. But conversely, it's good to think things through, because you could also have the opposite effect right now, where people are a much more emotional anger response or hurt response, or you know, feeling like you're adding to the stress of their lives. So that's my 2 cents. I'll let you guys chime in now.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to?
Yeah, you know, it's funny because it's just been, what, 10, 11, 12 weeks. I mean, it's you know, it's relatively so new. As far as the consumer psyche, as far as businesses, basically getting their customers back into, you know, physical space, or even, you know, doing deals in this landscape. The main thing is it is a public health issue, and knowing, you know, information is key, and essentially, you know, going through the proper channels as far as, you know, providing your customer and your employee a safe environment, whether it's with obviously, you know, there's guidelines that you have to provide signage, you know, social distancing measures, probably incorporate, you know, plexiglass barriers for you know, to stop any transmissions, essentially, or mitigate those. You know, all those sort of visual cues and I guess visual cues that's going to look odd if you were, you know, 3 months ago, if you went into a store that you saw that, but it just seems, you know, day to day, as you know, the consumer, you know, obviously the bigger shopping, you know, supermarkets have implemented some of those guidelines. So, you know, it is, you know, there is a change, whether it's permanent or not. It all just depends on the health of the consumer and the individual. So, I mean, if there's some confidence that, you know, if your antibodies you're protected, then, you know, status quo. But we're all just trying to, you know, figure it out, you know, as information comes. So,
Noel, I'll get to you, Michael, just a second. I was just asking, have you seen that kind of split in terms of what Andrea was elaborating on, in terms of some tenants that are kind of looking to return to normalcy as quickly as possible? They want to get back open, versus some that are either looking for leadership or further direction, or, you know, they're kind of caught between, you know, if I open with the reduced foot traffic, with, you know, just going through the budget, it's not worth it, and they're looking for some more direction. Are you seeing that split at all between your clients, or is there a more unified front?
yeah, no, definitely, and I think it's not just a black or white or blue or red issue. It's just essentially, you know, there are, yeah, you know, there is a psyche of like, hey, we're you know, the human spirit is stronger than this, and, you know, we could defeat this, you know, mind over matter type of psyche. And then there's a psyche of like, yeah, you know, science dictates how the rules are played. And so we have to abide by those because, this is, it's a very, it's a serious issue.
Mhm.
So yeah, but then, from there, there's also business owners, in that boat or essentially that, realize, yeah, business has to be conducted in a way where we still have to, there's only a certain amount of assistance that, the public government could provide. And we have to, figure this out and safely reopen. So.
Great.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, Mo,
Mhm.
I think in the near term, I love what you both said. I think so much of it in the near term is hard to predict. Not only because of not only because of the obvious, but also we don't really know how much to trust some of the economic numbers we have right now. We obviously have enormous unemployment. How much of that is because the unemployment benefits are so generous that there's really a clear disincentive to go back to work? How much of it is that? I think that in terms of what Andrea was saying and being bombarded with bad news, I think that will happen economically for a while, at least with retail, in as much as you're going to see a lot of bankruptcies and you're going to see even some liquidations. And from a consumer confidence perspective, that's going to feed this notion that the sky is falling. So I think, and then so I think at best consumer spending, at least in the near term, is going to rebound gradually, fitfully, and it will vary widely. The reality is that there are certain states which have been affected far less than others. I think, though, the bigger point is, yes, we're in a very unique situation right now, and retailers have to pivot without overcorrecting. And my fear to some degree is that we do start overcorrecting on the basis of the notion that this is the way it's always going to be, right? You hear of restaurants that are thinking of doing away with dining rooms entirely. And to me, thinking in the longer term, I'm not a big believer in the sensationalist forecasts you're hearing, that everything will be bought online, everyone will have their food delivered, everyone will be working from home. There's certainly going to be some shifts in those directions. But right now we're doing a lot of those things because we don't really have a choice, right? And I think ultimately we are human beings, right? And we all of this, whether it's going to restaurants, whether it's even going shopping, we like doing this stuff. We don't only do it because we have to. We do it because we want to. And I don't think that's necessarily going to change in the long term once we get past this period of fear and uncertainty. And so I think it's important for retailers and the organizations that plan for them not to go too far in response to what we're seeing now, to the point where we can no longer reverse ourselves once we're through this. Because the reality is that 99.95% of us are going to make it through this. And we're still going to be the human beings that we were before. So I think it's important to have a sense of balance in how we plan for that long term.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that the kind of that concept of how people want to do something for the experience, not just the transaction. And really, I think that's the unique value that retail brings versus just going on Amazon or just shopping online, is enjoying yourself. And we'll start to see as people, places open, matching that optimism of saying that we're open with the consumer that's a little more cautious. It was just announced today that LA and Long Beach as well are going to start to reopen dine-in restaurants as well as hair salons. So there'll be a briefing, at least for Long Beach, later today with more details. But that kind of goes off of that in terms of they're saying they're open, and these are very intimate businesses, retail businesses, but kind of matching the the consumer, seeing if they're there to meet them, or if places are, or the shopper, the diner is a little more apprehensive going forward. So there is that kind of push and pull between those two sides, but it seems pretty optimistic just in terms of the resiliency of the human spirit, and as you said, Michael, wanting to enjoy yourself and wanting to be back out there, given limits. So we're a little pressed for time, but I want to get to our next question here. We spoke about this briefly, Andrea, but how are retailers changing their messaging and their communication strategies in response to this augmented social norm? I included some of these screenshots of ads that you had presented me, and these are all examples of something you would never see 3 months ago in terms of what they're emphasizing in the ad, in terms of being cautious, the fact that something is made locally, or that people are, invested in the values of the consumer rather than just trying to get them to purchase something. What if you could briefly just kind of explain that change, just because we're just a little pressed for time here.
Sure. So in the beginning, when this first happened, we saw a lot of tactless or tone deaf ads. Mm-hmm. People hadn't adapted yet. Now that we're a little further in, we're starting to see how things are changing. And as we've all seen on TV, there's a wealth of other ads that are integrating the messaging of what we're all going through right now. And that's really effective and important to do. But then there's also ads that are like this, not necessarily directing the attention specifically to what you're going through explicitly. It's more of an implicit thing. And anytime, I think that the trend, the positive trend, and I think this is what any retailer should be doing, is focusing on, like Michael was saying, the human connection, the sense of community, the sense of being in it together. Messages, regular messages of even sales and things like that are a little trickier to navigate right now. So for instance, there's a lot more success when if you're going to have a sale to promote something, or you're going to promote something, to try to keep that angle of human and community approach, and maybe even pull in donations to a specific cause, things like that. But I think also, for instance, the middle ad doesn't get into the human connection as much, but it also acknowledges on that low-key level that, hey, if this is where we're at for a while, we might as well have a little fun with it. We might as well give ourselves something that makes us feel more normal again. If I'm going to wear a mask, at least I can look cute and it matches my outfit, kind of thing. And I think that is the reality. Even if this virus went away tomorrow, we're still going to have this economic fallout for a while, where people need that positive spin on things. So I think that's a really good method. Also, I think too, just being a little bit more open and vulnerable. Some of the local businesses in downtown Long Beach I've seen successfully be show their human side, show their behind the scenes stuff. That's a really effective strategy right now too.
Great. Yeah, I think, the whole concept of kind of advertising caution is something that seems relatively new to me, in terms of being able to promote a lifestyle or something with a product or in a retail store, but then, yeah, exposing, kind of wearing your heart on your sleeve a little more, and having context, essentially, just being really good at being able to capture that is a good way going forwards. And yeah, as you said, I think over the past couple of months, brands and retailers have realized that this is the way to go in terms of being able to connect with people and show that there's across the counter, there's another human being that has to get up, go to work every day. It's not just a shop. So yeah, we're almost out of time, but Noel, I want to ask you this here. What can tenants and property owners do to keep their spaces relevant? So that could be tenant improvements, like you were talking about, with protective layout, and then also in terms of business continuity. So if there are any cash flow issues or financial issues with things like fixed costs like rent or things like that, how can a tenant and a property owner keep that mutually beneficial relationship going in these times?
Yeah, I think, everybody is in the same sandbox, so they have to work together to find a amicable resolution to things.
Mm-hmm.
The issue now that's sort of coming up is some legislation measures that's been brought up in California anyway, that may alter how we conduct business. So in the sort of real estate space. So those things you just have to be sorted out as far as the state of conducting real estate business as a whole, as an investment, long-term investment on the business side, but also to provides spaces that creates memories and experiences. So in the short term, obviously, space is only going to be utilized 25, 30, 40% possibly. So essentially, utilizing outdoor spaces where the mayor obviously trying to provide more outdoor seating and closing off certain streets to provide that. That those are just the things. I think the challenges is just you are essentially paying for space that you're only utilizing a certain amount. That you sort of have to make sure that your income supports that business model. And if it only supports it to keep the lights on, that may be the case. To actually, have the income that you were producing pre-COVID, that's something, whether it's cutting certain costs or, I just, that would be sort of case by case basis. So, at the end of the day too, it's just, making sure that the environment is safe, and the customer and the employees and the vendors, they're all just there's insurances that they can be they can be healthy. So
that's kind of like a physical manifestation of what Andrea was talking about in terms of what the consumer is looking for and what they're feeling. And I feel like a lot of it as well, especially since you guys are local and the tenants and the property owners, is having that, it seems that human relationship is key. Working out whatever issues you have, if you're able to be on good terms and understand that you're going through it together. But it's interesting to see how those two kind of collide between marketing and the concept, and then how that manifests itself in the layout of an actual business. And so I'll end with this question. This is open-ended. There doesn't really have to be an answer. But you guys are all alluding to it, but will the retail sector take a permanent hit, or maybe to paint that in a better light, will there be a permanent change as a result of these public health orders and closures? Yeah, I'd like to hear from each of you on this one, but there's no wrong answer or right answer. Michael, if you want to begin. I think you're on mute. No worries.
Sorry. You hear me now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of different ways to go with that question. I mean, I will say, maybe this is glass half full to some, but we had really reached a stalemate on a lot of issues related either directly or indirectly to downtown and Main Street retail, right? and frankly, these were issues I wasn't sure how they were ever going to end, frankly. This is kind of a grand reset in a way. If we think of what was holding back further growth in especially in cities like San Francisco or the Los Angeles area, what were the factors? Well, there was a lot of concern about overly high rents. I think there'll be not as much concern about that going forward, right? There was concern about overly high construction costs. Mm-hmm. Well, I think we're not going to have to worry about that for a while, right? There was concern about historically low unemployment. Well, we're not going to have to worry about that, right? And I've always thought that the most interesting business districts are the ones where the rent structure is forgiving enough to allow for a lot of different things to happen. And so, looking at it in a glass half full sort of way, I think actually some of those issues that, again, I think really we had gridlocked on, there's now been some release. The other point I want to make about that is, and I kind of alluded to this before, I have little doubt that that online's market share will grow after this. But I'm not convinced that it will grow as dramatically as is been said in many corners. I mean, for one thing, I don't know about you, I've found the whole experience of buying groceries online to be uninspiring and not at all time efficient. And that's aside from the fact of waiting a month for Instacart and Amazon to actually deliver something. So again, just because we're doing it now doesn't mean we'll do it when we have a choice. But I think more to the point, we were talking a lot about consumer psyche. Consumer psyche does not exist in a vacuum. It's also affected by what the retailer does. And the reality about e-commerce and also about food delivery, by the way, and it's kind of still a big secret, neither of those make any money for retailers, right? E-commerce is a huge money loser for retailers, given the very high shipping costs, customer acquisition costs, returns. Amazon, even at its scale, barely ekes out a profit on e-commerce, makes all its money from the cloud, right? So, and we don't, as consumers, want to pay delivery fees, right? And that's gonna, so I think that's one piece, that e-commerce is a money loser, right? And also with food delivery, the restaurants hate doing it because they have to pay insanely high commissions to the delivery platforms. Delivery platforms aren't making any money on it. That's why Uber Eats is trying to buy Grubhub, right? And I have trouble believing anything is going to become everything if no one can make any money on it. And I think in the end, retailers have an interest, restaurants have an interest to get you in the store, to get you in the dining room, because those are their more profitable customers. And I think that will have an impact on what the consumer does. Retailers have all sorts of ways to manipulate your behavior as consumers. And they have an interest in making sure there's still a balance and it doesn't skew too far in the direction of either online or brick and mortar. Again, maybe that's glass half full. But to me, we've got some real problems with the business models. And that's gonna, revert back to how consumers spend their money going forward. So
I do like that grand reset idea. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
And what Noel was saying earlier too, in terms of accelerated trajectory of the way things were already going. So that combined. Yeah, Noel, if you have any closing thoughts.
Yeah, I think, permanent hit, I mean, just like any disruption in the marketplace, what happens is we assess it and then we use it as part of the rules to add the rules to the game and then sort of play within those rules. So whether it's, automation, 5G technology coming in, humans have always dealt with disruptions throughout. I mean, you could even say like the Iron Horse when the Iron Horse was built. Everybody's like, oh, oh my gosh. So yeah, we don't, like Michael said, we're not in a vacuum. There are always going to be, cases, case by case, outlier stats but, and even, with 9/11, travel was changed. Oh my gosh, we have to take off our shoes. Like, that was like such a crazy idea before, but now it's, we've accepted, certain security measures.
Yeah.
So, is it going to be those draconian measures that, some experts think, who knows? It's still so new, whether it's, are we going to be all sort of, tracked and traced with our phones or a chip or, certain things. It's just, there is going to be some changes, good and bad. And it's how, the consumer sort of pivots and reacts to those things, just like everything else that's been presented to us for years and centuries. We're resilient. So we figure it out as best as we can. So
it's really dictated kind of by demand as well. It's what it seems like. It kind of helps to shape that. Andrea, any closing thoughts in terms of this question?
Yeah, I agree with Michael's glass half full perspective. I do think a lot of things are going to change in the infrastructure of retail businesses, which will affect consumers positively, I think. And I also agree with Noel that, there's a lot of things that seem crazy to us or would have a few months ago, wearing masks. And now we're starting to get used to, like, okay, when I go to the store, I need to wear a mask kind of thing. And, but I also think, I would say, in my experience, I've actually seen a lot of success with e-commerce business on the small to mid-sized business level, but based on different brand positioning. So businesses like Grubhub and Amazon and all those, one of the big fatal flaws is that they're basing their brand on price. And whenever you do that, you're always going to be dancing this constant game of lowering the price but trying to maximize profit. I think the businesses who are doing successful things online e-commerce wise are the ones that are positioning themselves for different reasons that other companies can't do. And I also think there's something very interesting going on when we talk about actual retail products. We're going to see a big shift, I think, in, pretty much everything was going to China or other countries. And especially just in consumer goods, we're seeing already that we're seeing all these local businesses creating masks and selling them and other things like that. I hope that this is a great equalizer and that it returns us back to some of the things that can actually help local communities stay in business long term. But I mean, the reality is none of us have ever gone through this. So we're all working from our expertise, which is important. But I think we don't know what's going to happen, but the more that we stay true to people behind business, that kind of insulates us from some of the catastrophic results of just being super profit seeking. Of course, we need profit too, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say, sorry too, no. I just want to mention too, and I think Noel touched on this earlier, use this opportunity to be a leader in your community, to be a brand, to show brand leadership, because not unpolitically, I think we see that we have a real flux of what's going on leadership governmentally all across the nation. Some places are doing a great job, others are not. So step up, because your community is looking for leaders. And if you position your business as a leader, that's going to really set you up long term.
Yep. Crisis reveals character, as you were saying. And so, yeah, that's a good line. But that idea of going back to you know, the more internal motivations behind a lot of these either physical changes, strategic changes, and looking for spaces and marketing. I think it, yeah, all comes back to that human element and that intrinsic demand for wanting to not just buy things and have a transaction, but yeah, to have that experience, whether it's changed or not, you know, going forward is something. But yeah, as Noel was saying, where there's a new normal in response to a large catastrophic event, I agree that I think it'll take time, but you know, these norms will become something that almost becomes subconscious, you know, like taking your shoes off at the airport going forward. And it won't really be till then when you have that hindsight, you know, to see what was done correctly and incorrectly. So yeah, you know, everything's unfolding in real time right now. So it's really fascinating to be able to see what you guys are describing take place and also kind of use it to look forwards just a little bit. But yeah, that's all. We ran a little over for time, so I don't have any time for questions, but I want to thank you guys so much for taking part in this webinar with the DLBA. You know, this is one of our first forays into this model of communication, and I think it's really nice to be able to have people, you know, see a human face on the other side rather than just, you know, reviewing slides or getting emails. So I really want to thank you guys for taking part in this. There's a lot of policy changes going on. As I said, retail and dining, in addition to personal grooming, is slowly starting to be reintroduced in Long Beach and LA. There's yet to be a concrete guidelines, but it was recently announced. So if you're looking for more specific updates, getting into the nitty-gritty of those, coming up this Tuesday, we're going to have our weekly resource update with our partners from the city, from our Workforce Development Board, in addition to the Small Business Development Center. And so these speakers are going to give you specifics on financial resources that are available, work share programs, unemployment benefits, in addition to updates on the rules for things like retail, personal grooming, dine-in businesses, where you can find a checklist of what you're able to do. And so that'll be the same time as this webinar this coming Tuesday, with the same link as well. So I'd really urge you guys, if you're a business or you're looking, again, to speak to a person and ask an open-ended question about anything related to financial resources or managerial, technical advising, please, yeah, join us for that webinar. But other than that, that's all today. I'll email out the contact info and links to our speakers' websites as well if you want to learn more about them. But yeah, I'd really just thank you so much for helping us out, Noel and Michael and Andrea.
Yeah, thanks, Mo. Thanks for setting this up, and thank you for everybody that attended and the DLBA for their continued support in the business community and you know, just the Long Beach community.
Great.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great to meet you guys, and I would just like to say thank you to DLBA too. That is a great example of community leadership, and we appreciate you guys.
Thanks.
Same here. Thanks a lot.
Yep.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks, Noel. Thanks, Andrea. All right, I think that's it. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys on Tuesday.
All right, guys. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.